Welcome back, everyone. We're continuing our discussion around employee surveys. And in this session, I want to talk about your survey methodology. How do you design the survey itself? Um, there's loads of ways in which companies approach this, and they often, as I mentioned before, use third parties. I recommend it. Of course, I'm biased. I am a third party, but still, you have a higher likelihood of participation and rigor and the likelihood of higher trust in taking that approach. In terms of conducting surveys, this falls under the practice of social research. There is a manner and approach to collecting employee survey to minimize bias and ensure the likelihood of a consistent understanding and approach to a given survey item. And we'll use that term survey item as opposed to survey question. The reason why for that is the preferred practice in conducting a survey is to provide employees with survey items, which you can call them questions if you want, but they come in the form of a positive stated uh, survey item. Let me give you an example. As you see on the screen, here's a survey item that I'm using now for one of my clients, but it's historically used for a lot of companies. It states the company supports my growth and development. Now, this is a positive tone survey item that's in the form of a 6 level response rate. Survey responses preferably come in the form of either what's referred to as a Likert scale, which is a 5 level rating system. So if it was not this 6 level rating system that you see here, strongly disagree, disagree, somewhat agree, somewhat disagree, somewhat agree, agree, strongly agree. The argument for a Likert system is that maybe someone is just not sure of how to respond. So the optional 5 level rating system would be strongly disagree, agree, disagree, unsure slash not applicable, agree, strongly agree. Now, I also have a general view that, and this is not applied here, and as I think about it, I wish we had made this change, that if you use a neutrally positive tone in stating your survey items, again, the survey item here is the company supports my growth and development. Another survey item could read, I believe there's high trust among my team as we do our work. These provide a supposition of a positive outcome. And then employees respond to that to say something like, yeah, I agree with that, or to some degree, they either strongly agree or disagree. Because the use of a positive tone survey item is being applied here, my preference, and it's not represented here, my preference is to go straight from the positive tone to a likelihood of a positive result. So the company supports my growth and development. I strongly agree to that. It's sort of consistent with the tone. This is not that big a deal. I'm getting into the weeds a bit because one could provide a counter argument to say, well, it's actually better to force people to slow down a bit in that you are progressively going from negative to positive and that people might think in those terms. Thus, the notion of strongly disagree all the way to strongly agree. But nevertheless, primary points here is utilize a positive tone survey item. Instead of asking the question, make a positive tone statement so that people can then react to. And they then anticipate that all future survey items will be represented to them in a same or similar fashion. And they won't get tripped up, and you won't try to cause them to trip up. And suddenly, responding to a survey item that has been flipped into a negative. So stick with the positive, stay consistent, make it a statement, utilize either the 5 point or 6 point scale as noted here. The reason why we tend to use these 5 level, or in this case, 6 level rating systems is that it shows just enough distinction. It's easy to graphically represent them for that matter, the outcomes, because there's clear enough distinctions. In the work I do as an executive coach, I do a force rated only 3 level for clear distinction. So I may ask for feedback on a executive attribute and I'll say, to what extent does this executive demonstrate strategic management? Do you strongly agree, Or I may simply say it's a strength, they're generally effective representing it, or it's an opportunity for development. That's a clear distinction with a positive tone, right? So even if they realize, I think there's some work that could be done for my boss on this, at least their option here is one of a positive tone, opportunity for development. We talked a lot about this in performance management. There's a practice argument that says that's what should be done when distinguishing people's performance. It's easier to take action to it and accept it, and those distinctions are clear and distinct. The reason why we broaden this uh, option of levels of responses here, these response rates are either 5 or 6, is we allow for employees to be a bit more discerning on how they view something, and they can be a bit more nuanced in how they view things as well. And because we're doing social surveys on a large scale, typically, then that discernment then gets mixed into the total survey results. And you have higher confidence levels when there's that much of a distinction. We don't recommend 10-point scales. The reason why is because then we move towards this notion of rater bias. Rater bias simply means that some employees may find that they are harsh raters. They proudly state that, no one's ever a 10 in my book. And so they don't state that someone is doing something extremely well because they just don't consider that is an achievable rating level. I used to work with an organization based out of Japan, and their entire um, business mindset was that extreme ratings were something that should not be valued, that people shouldn't stand out that much. So there's a whole argument around rater bias, and the flip side could be true. If we tell people positive things, they'll do positive things. So I tend to rate softer. And can people truly distinguish between a 6 rating and a 7 rating? Is there clear distinction that could be absolutely distinguished, especially on cultural things? So those are rationales for keeping your survey um, rating responses at that 5 or 6 level, as discussed. There's also the notion of open text, giving space for employees to provide open text responses. There's an argument that at the end of each major section of a survey, you give room for open text. I'm not a big fan of open text for every single question. Let's say you have a 35 survey item survey, and there's open text for every single one of those. The advantage is that, of course, people can give feedback on how they came up with their rating on each one of those, or they want to expand on their rationale, whatever it may be. But that's a lot of data and a lot of time, as opposed to taking each section and having a summary request. Please provide any additional feedback that would be helpful to any of your survey responses above. And then you may close out with some open text questions that could be more broadly rated around things of interest for the company, its culture, where it is in the business, or other things where you just want to get opinions. The challenge there is being able to act on those opinions with confidence that the themes will emerge. You have to have really good survey assessors so they can look at that text, not allow bias to enter into the picture, and then summarize key themes that come out of the open text items. Demographics are something else to consider. When you ask individuals to complete a survey and then you add specific questions related to how long they've worked for the company, the location they work in, whether they manage people or not, if there's a lot of cross referencing in your data analytics, again, employees are smart. They may realize, well, there's only 10 people in my particular location. We've got 2 managers, And we also have people who've worked here for a short period of time. 3 people have worked here for less than a year. And so suddenly they start to realize it'd be pretty easy to know who said what under these circumstances. So make sure that when you create demographics within your survey, you've tested it to ensure that your minimum response rate is 7 or more. 7 or more. And you can say that with confidence. So if employees question the value of demographics and it's starting to look like you can determine who said what, you can say, we tested it. A minimum of 7 or more people will fit into each of our demographic questions for the survey for this year. And then finally, incentivizing participation. Now, this may seem like you're trying to create your own form of bias by sort of causing people to want to respond in a positive way. You're bribing them into positivity, but there's longstanding practice of ensuring participation, say in manufacturing facilities where people may not have ready access to laptops and computers, that and they can come into a room, complete the paper pencil survey, and get a T-shirt on the way out or pizza. You're not biasing their approach to given questions, but you're ensuring a high level of response, which is ultimately the best outcome you could have as a starting point for a survey is having the confidence of large participation. That means your data has much more meaning and value. Okay, so there's a bit of overview on survey design.